I'll start. My name's Raina Hughes. I'm a design advisor for Ibstock Brick, and welcome and thank you for coming this afternoon and attending our session today. Today we're going to be looking at carbon conscious specification and how we can take a more balanced approach to design and specification. But before we start, we've just got to do a little bit of housekeeping. So if there's no fire alarm planned, so if you hear a fire alarm, please do run to the front of the building and get out. Toilets, if anyone does need them during the session, are just down the stairs and through the building, through the door even to the back of the building. And there was one more thing that I had to talk about. Oh, filming as well. I hope no one's got any objections to filming or photography, because we will be doing that during the session. So just a little bit about your guest speakers. So this is me, Ray for short, which is just easier to say. We've also got Agni here, so she's our specification manager for London. And we're very lucky to be joined today by two of our sustainability team, our group sustainability team. We've got Michael and we have Joanna, and they are very well versed in our sustainability strategies. I hope so. I'm really hoping so when it comes to questions and answers, let's put it that way. So this is our team. We've been working very hard at Ibstock. Just a little bit about us at Ibstock. I work for the clay division, so I work for the bricks that you see around you, but we also have our concrete division as well. We're just going to talk today about carbon, and then we're going to wrap up a little bit talking about the products that we have and how we can help you with your designs and implementation. So moving on, what are we going to learn today? Hopefully you're going to come away with something interesting and relevant to you today. What we're going to be looking at today is sustainable choices, so rethinking preconceptions about today's building materials. Obviously we're going to have a main focus on brick. Looking at how the humble clay brick can deliver inspiring and sustainable design briefs, not just in building, but I know we've got some landscape architects here today, so hopefully we'll be able to inspire those designs as well. How can we drive a more balanced approach to specification and carbon as well? Here we go, the all-important embodied carbon, so I'm preempting myself a little bit there. So how do they compare to other building materials, and how do they compare to each other as well? And the all-important value of transparency of product information and manufacturer data. So I don't know if we've got any carbon accountants here, but I'm sure it's really important that we can give you that data, and how much of that data we can give you right now and where we are on that journey. So moving on, we couldn't really talk about climate change without talking about or mentioning Sir David Attenborough. And this is the comment he made at the last COP26 conference. So as we build a better world, we must acknowledge no nation has completed its development because no nation is yet sustainable. And all have a journey still to complete. And we all know that that's true. We're all at the beginning of our sustainability journey, and that's no better said than within the construction industry itself. But when we take in brick, a material such as brick, we believe that this statement does closely relate to Sir David's comment. And that's because we believe we've got a self-sustainable material base. So our product is predominantly taken from the UK, and it's processed and manufactured in the UK as well. So we can, very little of our product is transported from other countries. So that sort of puts us in a statement of where we can agree that we can become a much more sustainable environment, but we do still have that journey to come. Now this statement, we all know, is quite an agreeable statement that we all understand, and it's all something that we can buy into. But the reality of the question is, how do we become a more sustainable nation? Or more to the context, how does the construction industry contribute to a more sustainable environment? So we're just going to start on a very, very small scale here at the minute. So what does sustainability mean to you? So you can see the graph here that's on the screen. We've got dairy milk, which shows the greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram as 3.15, and we're going to take oat milk as an example at 0.9 kilograms. So dairy milk is 3 times more carbon output or carbon output equivalent than oat milk. But what if you really like the taste of dairy milk above all other options there? I mean, does that make you an eco-criminal because you love dairy milk? How many people here drink dairy milk rather than a soy or alternative? Yep, me too. Love it, never going to change it. Love dairy milk. Does that make me an eco-criminal? No. What it does say, what this simple example does show, is that the decisions we make, it's much more complex than simply being sustainable. It's not easy to say, I'm just going to make the sustainable choice every single time. There's a myriad of factors and decision-making options that will display the reason why we choose to use a particular product or a particular material, so in design or in our everyday lives. So just moving on from that from a little bit more fun, and looking a bit more closely at what sustainability means to you. So we've got Gina here, and she has a vegetarian daughter. So she's not vegetarian herself, but she can't be bothered to make meat meals all the time. So she mainly eats the vegetarian meals with Gina. But she does like a cheeky chicken sandwich over lunchtime. And then we've got Jack, who is a meat eater, loves it. But he does drink oat milk just to reduce his personal carbon output there. So who do you think, and we're going to ask you later on at the end of the seminar, who do you think has the lower carbon footprint? And if we've got any carbon accountants here, in grams, do you know what the difference might be? So you can write it down, and maybe if you feel confident, you could shout that out at the end. But it's just food for thought. It just helps to emphasize that in every single day of our life, we are making options that look at what our carbon output, our carbon footprint is. And if we're doing that everyday lives on food, when we're looking at design, we're obviously making a greater impact. So I was just talking earlier with a gentleman about cultural change, and yes, it's something we all need to do. But what do we need to do to become more sustainable in our building designs and construction processes? So there's a need to inspire a genuine cultural change by refocusing how a sustainable building is perceived. Now, some in the audience are my age, some are a little bit younger, but the photograph we've got here is a typical example of what we would consider a sustainable building at the turn of the century. So we've got the green roof, we've got the timber, but is that really enough now? It's just not enough, and we need to be going a lot more further than providing a green roof if we're going to combat climate change. So we've got Hampton Court Palace here, built in 1515. This, to me, wouldn't initially, to everyone, be what you would class as a sustainable building. But it's been standing for over 500 years. And I think what we need to be focusing on now is new solutions, longevity and circular economy. Providing a green roof just simply isn't going to be enough for us to survive climate change. Regeneration, reuse and repurposing is becoming a critical strategy. So again, we're just going to take a look here. So 2 major UK cities, but these could simply be any city in the world, really. So we've got Manchester and London as examples here. So just a question, what do you think the dominant materials are in these pictures? Glass, yeah, glass, aluminium, steel. So glass and metal are the 2 predominant materials that you'll see on this skyline. And like I say, pretty typical across the UK of what you would see. But glass has twice the embodied energy of brick, of a clay brick product, when it's double or triple glazed. And if you're going to use laminate or low E-coated glass, that can't be recycled at all. So in terms of glass and the prospect for a circular economy, glass doesn't fare too well. Steel, although it has 3 times as much embodied energy as carbon, it can be recycled, repurposed or reused. So it is a little bit better in terms of the circular economy strategy. But what about rethinking our contemporary skylines? What about using vernacular products such as clay in our cities? So we've got some examples here right throughout the UK. So we've got London, Leeds and Manchester. And all have designed buildings using the local vernacular red brick here. And it's interesting that these buildings here, still very contemporary, still very good looking, but use a much lower embodied carbon or balanced approach towards their design and specification. And also, yeah, we can use them as large-scale and high-rise projects as well, which I think is really important when we're looking at a premium of cities in terms of sites, and we're building up because it's pretty much the only way we can go. But can we consider a more balanced approach? So too much of one material can appear dominant, like we saw with the glass and the steel. Yet it might be favoured by the planners because it's quite reflective to the sky. But actually, can we get a more balanced approach in our designs in our cities? So we've taken the Shard, which I'm sure we all know, living here in London or working here in London at least. Very, very popular skyline feature. And what we've done is we've added a bit of brick to it. So I think it still looks as stunning. Nothing is taken away from it. The natural beauty of the clay really does bring it out. But the combination of using the glass with the steel and the brick itself does bring down the embodied energy of the project overall. And it's just, what's everyone's thoughts on that, on using brick? Do you think it's feasible that we could use that? Do we think it's beautiful as a product? Anyone?
Looks amazing. I think in terms of real estate, the view is everything, isn't it? So
The view is everything.
you've lost the view, haven't you? So in terms of, yeah, it's beautiful, but in terms of selling off the real estate on the floors,
That's a really interesting concept.
the view is what sells.
So maybe we could punch out windows rather than just using the whole of the brick there to design it. That was far too complicated for us to put together in Photoshop, to be quite honest. But yeah, punched windows, smaller use of a high embodied material balanced against a lower sort of carbon material can still provide the views, but actually overall we're doing a lot to reduce that carbon footprint.
And I think it's worth mentioning the circular economy approach to the whole thing. Okay, everything's got a use at the end of its life. But if you take steel and glass, you still get a high energy input to remake it into something else. Whereas brick, you can use the bricks that are still there and reuse for some other purpose.
Yeah.
When there's a low energy input to make it something else.
Absolutely.
Not thinking about the now, thinking about the future.
Yeah,
And that's a key strategy, is we need to start thinking about the future, and that's the beauty of bricks, which I'll go on to a little bit more detail later on, but the longevity is definitely a key factor. So it's not just about inspiring the change, it's about us helping you to create innovative designs as well. And it's also about offsetting the carbon footprint of a project, not based on other materials, but also based on our products as individual products. So here we've got stretcher bond, which is roughly 60 bricks per metre square. And from the BDA, so the Brick Development Association's EPD, we've worked out it's roughly 30 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per metre square. So we have looked into the impact of what we can do if we change the brick bond pattern. So we've looked at Flemish bond, English bond and head bond. And as you can see, there's a slight increase in the CO2 equivalent output when you do change the bond pattern. Now that very much does base on the brick as well. So here at Ibstock, we are going through our data, carbon data within individual brick types, so that then we can look at what their individual outputs are. At the minute, we're basing it on the Brick Development Association's EPD and information and data. But how does that help you? Well, if you want to use one of our beautiful handmade bricks from Swanage, they may have a slightly higher carbon output. So actually let the beauty of the brick do the talking and keep it simple with a stretcher bond. But maybe you want to have an English or a Flemish bond, which is becoming increasingly popular in design at the moment. You know, perhaps then that does increase, because of the bond pattern, it does increase the carbon output. So we can marry up bricks that have got slightly lower carbon outputs, so that then you're balancing against each other in terms of your design and your specification. I think what we're trying to show here, though, is that one size doesn't fit all. So engage with us early on, engage with us, look at the different brick types, look at the different ways that we can design in brick, and we will be able to help you to look at the outputs. So we just got there that's 33% extra with Flemish bond, 50%, 98%. But it is worth saying that that is based on the fact that we do guarantee what we call 1.5 faces. But we are working towards a brick slip factory which will guarantee 2 faces or all sides, which will then bring down the impact of that. But that's what we've got coming in the future. So that will significantly bring down the impact of that increased carbon outputs.
Yeah, and just before you go on, we talked about EPDs there, and it's worth mentioning that no 2 EPDs will be the same. And the issue you'll face, I've looked at hundreds of them. If you put some down on the table and look at the methodology, they're all different and it becomes complex trying to compare like for like different products and different materials. So it's very complex, so there needs to be a change in that approach as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are, yeah. So I don't even know what's coming up next. Future Homes and Building Standard. So yeah, Future Homes and Building Standard is coming in 2025. I'm sure most of you actually know that. But what are we doing, or how does it impact you as designers and also us as manufacturers as well? So the legislation coming in says that all new builds are to produce 75 to 80% fewer carbon emissions by 2025. There are amendments to approved documents, parts F and L, so we're looking at ventilation, heating and power, but then there's also the new approved document, part O, which will then mitigate the risks of overheating. So as we're increasing our technology in thermal efficiencies, in terms of power and ventilation, we've also got that risk of overheating. And again, it's just balancing everything out, and it's focusing our attention on balancing how we do increase the development of products or initiatives that can reduce those carbon emissions, which is our ultimate goal, but then also not being I forgot the word, sorry, so that we don't then have a negative impact because we're trying to be so positive. And here at Ibstock, we are engaging in a project called Project 80, which is on Eco Drive. That is really called Eco Drive in Birmingham. And it's an initiative that has 12 houses initially built using brick with modern methods of construction. But it's also incorporating thermal efficiency technology, ventilation technology, PV cells, EV charging stations. And what they've done is they've not just put the same technology in all 12 houses. What they've done is they've mixed up different initiatives in all of the houses. And we're working with Birmingham City University to collect the data to then transfer that into how we're going to improve and meet the targets that are set in the Future Homes and Building Standards. Now we want to try and achieve that by 2023, 2024, before the standard comes in. So it gives us that data so that then we can look at how we can react or change to make sure we do meet the legislation when it comes in 2025. But the key is here is we're sort of looking at how performance is based against residential use. So the biggest changes we can make, and I do touch on this a bit later on, is domestic properties. The biggest impact we can make is domestic properties, but it relies on the end user and how they operate and use their buildings. So again, that's where our initiatives are focused. How are we teaching the end users of our buildings to use them properly and wisely? And if we don't do that, all of the design initiatives, the technology that goes in, it's not going to have the impact that we need. So I touched on circular economy a little bit earlier, and Michael mentioned it a little bit as well. But why do we need to move away from a linear economy? And the key things here is usage, it's waste, and quite rightly so. It's an increase in costs. You know, we all know that costs are rising. Everything's costing more. And the amount that we waste in the construction industry in terms of construction, demolition, excavation, it accounts for 60% of the total annual UK waste. So if we can develop strategies that become more circular, we can then really make a huge dent in that figure and bring that down. And again, we're losing over 6 billion per 100 billion of annual industry turnover. I mean, that's a massive amount. So, you know, if you take the bottom line of talking about money, you know, money talks, and if we can do things and have strategies available to us within a circular economy strategy, and we can save people money, I mean, that is a win-win situation. But what do we do as designers? You know, what are the strategies that are available to us within the design and construction industry? So I've just labelled some here, and I'm sure everyone's got an idea of what their strategy might be. There are a multitude. When I was looking at this and putting this together, I couldn't believe the number of initiatives, government bodies, professional bodies. Everyone is coming up with an initiative or an idea to reduce the carbon outputs. And so these are just some of mine, and I'm sure there's plenty of other initiatives and strategies available as well. But for me, and for me working at Ibstock as a design advisor, the important thing for me is that we look at early design, early collaboration. You know, the earlier you can get involved with suppliers, manufacturers of products, the easier it will become to meet any targets that have been set in the design brief. Again, considering the design of the materials, it's looking at that balanced approach that we've just been talking about. It's really important that we're designing for that waste management. Adaptability, like the lady was just saying, you know, adaptability is a key strategy in being able to become more circular around economy, designing for longevity as well. So I think in the architectural industry, we already were designing flexible layouts. You know, we were standardising grids. That's pretty standard within the architectural community to do that. But the separating layers to relate to lifespan is really important. How we put our buildings together, we have to acknowledge a strategy that helps us to then deconstruct them at a later date to make them more adaptable. So future deconstruction plans, designing for recovery, is a key strategy that we need to now focus on and identify how we're going to then put them together. So obviously they're secure and safe and meet our building regulations guidelines, but also when it comes to the time that they become unusable, how can we safely, easily and cost effectively deconstruct our buildings to reuse them. It's a key strategy to reuse buildings, and the more that we can reuse them, the more that we can recover in terms of carbon output. So I do talk a little bit about that later on as well. So there's no getting away from the fact that we've just talked a little bit about how much our industry wastes in terms of annual turnover, but also in terms of carbon. We are responsible for, according to these figures at the 2018 Global Status Report, back in 2017, it was calculated that we're responsible for around 39% of global CO2 emissions. I mean, that's a lot. So I think this simple pie chart here just diagnoses just how much we can make a dent in that if we just rethink our strategies, rethink our design, rethink our construction processes. So taking that a little bit further now, so as if there are any designers or architects here today, we need to be looking at the end users. So again, just touched on that with the residential community, but we need to be looking at what we're designing our buildings for, who we're designing our buildings for. So here we take the strategy of net zero whole life carbon, which were examples taken from the RIBA Sustainable Outcomes Guide of 2019. And RIBA are concentrating on a whole life carbon based on the project and the brief of the end users. So the three examples we've got here is the office, the warehouse and the residential. Now again, I'm going to take residential because as we all know, brick is the predominant material of that particular part of the industry. So we've got 51%, so we've got just over half of the whole life embodied carbon emissions. And that's embodied emissions up to practical completion. So this gives us a genuine opportunity here to reduce carbon emissions through more efficient processes and construction methods. But again, we can, warehouse is 47%, still over a third is for offices. And, so we have an opportunity here to take these materials and actually process them to reduce that carbon output. But again, I think this emphasises that one size does not fit all. It's about engaging with your manufacturers, your suppliers, your clients, your construction team, your design team. It's about all of us engaging to do what we can to reduce carbon output. So just again, looking at whole life cycle, so continuing on from that, there's a need for a genuine cultural change to refocus how we approach the route to net zero carbon. So we all know it's a route we need to take. It's how we achieve those goals and become net zero. So we need to place emphasis on whole life cycle. So again, I've taken this from the RIBA. So we're not simply looking at operational and upfront carbon outputs. We're looking at the whole life cycle. So we've got 3 strategies here. So we've got the negative operation carbon, and we've got this line here that says carbon neutral periods. Now the data shows that as being 60 years, which is the typical lifespan of a construction material. So we've got at the beginning of the cycle, we've got a very high embodied carbon product like brick, but as time goes, that trajectory line goes down till the point where it becomes carbon neutral and becomes carbon negative. We've got the negative embodied carbon, and here, again, we've got a product that would be carbon negative, but over time, when it's in use, over that 60 years, it actually does the trajectory goes up, and it actually does use carbon. And then we've got the holy grail of all strategies is the negative operational and embodied carbon. Now, I think we can all agree that we're quite far from having a strategy and products and lifespan that is carbon neutral for the whole of its operational use and its lifetime. But it is the goal, it's something we are aiming for. But I would say that brick, as I've just said, it does sit in that negative operational carbon strategy. And it's worth noting that over time, it does become negative. If buildings can last 150, 200, 300 years, I mean, that's a real positive for our product. So I'm just going to have a little drink, sorry. Probably sick of hearing me talking, so I'll take a little break. So what are we doing? So does anybody have any idea how many brick types roughly we might have in our particular company? Any idea? Anyone at the back who actually works for us? Any idea? No. Dumbfounded. I've stunned you all into silence, clearly. So, how many do we reckon?
Over 400.
I reckon over 400 as well. So we've got over 400 different brick products within our company alone. So you imagine other manufacturers, other industries, there's a wide array. So we'll take us as an example, quite obviously. So we'll start here with the figures from the University of Bath. People do automatically assume that brick is quite a high embodied carbon product. We obviously have a manufacturing process that does use a lot of carbon, but actually when you place it against a lot of these materials, these construction materials, we do fare quite lowly in sort of overall output. And I think that's definitely worth driving home. And also, when we're looking at our manufacturing facility, so this is our factory in the Midlands, this is our Eclipse factory, and we've also got our Leicester factory. So there's actually 2 factories there on that particular site. And if you can just see in the corner, you can see that's our clay quarry, our clay pit. So where we take our raw materials from is typically on site. Our factories are based right next to our clay, where we get our raw material from. And what we do is we take it over what can only be considered a massive conveyor belt. And that's what we do to get the product from the clay over to the factory. And I think there's only a very few of our factories where it's up to 10 miles away.
There's only a couple of factories up to 10 miles away. There's a couple of interesting stats for you in the Eclipse factory and Leicester factory as well. So the Eclipse factory, is 65% less carbon per tonne of product compared to the 1970s, and is 50% less carbon to a comparable factory anywhere in the world at the moment as well. So the investment in technology makes a huge difference.
Yeah, this is one of our very newest factories. I say new, but it feels new because of COVID, but it's actually quite a few years old now, isn't it?
3.5 years old,
Yeah.
It's still one of the most carbon and energy efficient factories in the world today.
Absolutely. You know, we've looked at all of our processes and where we can reduce not just carbon, but also water usage, plastics. We've got a lot of initiatives where we're trying to bring those in line with the legislation and the strategies that we need to combat climate change. So just there, as it says there as well, 95% of our raw materials come from the UK. So that is a huge factor in terms of transport, where products are coming from. So a lot of these figures never do take into account transportation, you know, and it's really important that we address the whole of the information, the whole of the data. Most of our products, when they're finished, they've been manufactured, they tend to go around 80 miles from factory to site as well. So we've got very, very short distances when it comes to not only the raw material, but also the finished product as well. So that data is also very, very useful when you're looking at the overall carbon output of our products in comparison to others.
Just before you move on, it's also worth mentioning, if you look at the photograph there, there's lots of translucent panels on the roof, and that was designed specifically so that natural light gets in. And my friend Joanna here will vouch for this better than me, that healthy buildings mean healthy employees if you let natural light in as well.
Yeah.
So that was a huge difference to the whole business and to our people.
Absolutely. So are we achieving targets? Yes, we are. These are just a few that I've brought out as headline targets. We have a whole strategy which Michael and Joanna are very heavily involved in. We've achieved far more targets that are on the screen here, but these are some of our major targets that we're really proud of. So when we set out, was it 2019 we set out our initial strategy? 2018. We set out the initial strategy to reduce our fresh water or mains water by 5%. To date, it's 8%. It might even be a little bit more because it's a little bit more now, but it's 8% and growing.
Another stat for you. That we have 100% of our overall water usage. Only 20% is from mains water. The rest is from a recycled source.
We do recycle a lot of water, and that's across all of our factories as well. So we're incorporating, you know, we've got our new factory that you've just seen, but all of our factories up and down the UK have got initiatives going on, haven't they? Sort of upgrading kilns, drying facilities. So it's not just concentrating on one factory. Our goal is zero waste to landfill by 2025. Again, 64% of waste material is recycled, but that might be a little bit more now. We're doing a lot to reduce plastic packaging as well, because we know that's a really important factor. We're always going to need those jackets over the bricks, just for transportation, and also they keep it waterproof as well, because that's really important for our products. But what we're doing is we've got a number of initiatives that are reducing those preventable plastic packaging. And I think this is a little bit more as well now, isn't it? We've got circa 10% at the minute. But 200 tonnes of plastic packaging we've removed, which is a really good figure. And the all-important carbon, so we made the aim of 15% reduction, and currently it's standing at 17%. Is it still? Yeah, 17%. So we are progressing and achieving targets, and on the back of that, we have set a new ESG strategy that obviously takes those targets even further.
It is, yeah.
We're hoping to be net zero by 2040, which is 10 years before you need to be at 2050. So we've got a real focus and a real push on sustainability within our business.
Absolutely. And the new strategy is based around 3 key focus areas: addressing climate change, improving lives, and manufacturing materials for life. And the reason we're focusing on that as well is because our carbon footprint is about 300,000 tonnes of carbon a year. 60% comes from gas, only 6% comes from electricity usage, and 30% comes from the raw material that makes it as well.
I'll keep talking, I'm drinking.
Okay. and over and above that, the key thing for us is adding in biodiversity. It's such an important part of it. We now know how many hedgerows we've got, how many paths we've got, how many wildlife bits of land that we've got, and all the different surveys that we do as well. So we are looking at lining up with biodiversity net gain 3.1, and that's set out by government and Nature England. So that's what we're aligning with.
Yeah, we do have our new sustainability CPD coming out at the end of the month, which does go into a lot more detail, like Michael's just been talking about. So biodiversity net gain, what we do as a company, we work with the local communities, people. Our people are important to us, you know, so we're addressing the whole of a sustainability. It's not all about carbon, it's about addressing sustainability as a whole. So yeah, we do go into a lot more detail if you do want to have our CPD. Nice little plug there. Get someone else to deliver it though, you might have more. So all important for everyone is source labelling and transparency, and what are we doing? So we are working towards providing more transparent data, but as you can appreciate, especially with a product range of over 400, and that's just our bricks, and that's not including our specials, our systems, it does take a lot of time to collate that information. But I know what we are doing is, I think we're aiming for 2024, is that correct? 2024 to have our data in place for release, yeah, is that right? Yeah. You're looking at me stunned and I'm thinking, have I got the wrong date?
One of the things we started 18 months ago, we brought in an external company to look at the data that we've got as a business. Because we're data rich. It's what do you do with that data, and what do our customers want from us in terms of data. And we've done a number of internal and external interviews as part of that. So the target we're aiming for is to have a PIM system, a product information management system. So that at a touch of a button we'll be able to print out the carbon footprint, water footprint, anything to do with a product that you buy from us.
Yeah. So yeah, as Michael said, we are working through our portfolio of data. So as I mentioned earlier, we're just using statements from our brick development agency at the minute. But as we could take an example here, we've got a product which is from our Leicester site to the Eclipse factory at Leicester. So that's the sort of carbon output for that individual brick there, and we are working through that. But what we are doing is all of the factories are different, so they're all at a different level of initiatives and upgrade. So we have to level out that playing field, don't we? So we use the Pew matrix, is that correct? Yeah, we use the Pew matrix, which then gives us a level playing field. So all of the information is accurate based on that level playing field, and we think that's really important for comparison. So we are doing a lot. We're working very much towards transparency and being given that data to carbon accountants, anyone who needs it. So, yeah.
I think the key word there earlier on from David Attenborough was a journey.
Yeah.
We're all on a journey.
Yeah.
It's not a quick
I think that's in my notes actually. It's like it is on a journey, and we are, all of us are, you know, we're all learning how we can reduce our carbon output, but we are very much at the beginning of the journey. We've made huge progresses as a company, and I can see, you know, I'm involved in a lot in sustainability and design and the architectural community, and I can see the progress we're making, but we are still very much at the beginning of that journey, and we do need to keep pushing on with it. Oh. So how can we be successful as an architectural and construction industry? What does success look like, and how do we contribute to the journey and make those real changes? So this was a poll that I attended at the Sustainability Supply Chain School, and the poll was, well, there's 54 candidates in this particular one, and the question was asked about what is stopping us from being successful. Now, the range of people was developers, suppliers, manufacturers, architects. There was a wide range of people across the industry. So what the three main categories that came up was collaboration, engagement, and knowledge. And I think that it's really interesting to see where we are in the journey. It emphasises where we are at the journey. So, you know, if you look at, say, skills, affordability, they're quite low. So the greater the word, the more that people thought that was an important factor. So, it shows how early on we are. You know, we need more knowledge. We need to engage more and collaborate as a community, as an architectural and construction community. And then the rest of it will follow. So the skills, the affordability, the reporting, we know they're important, that we know they're future strategies that we're embarking on at the minute. But right now, collaborating, talking, sharing information, it's absolutely vital for us to progress through this journey. So yeah, just touching on collaboration, because obviously as suppliers we do want to collaborate early on with designers, landscape architects, anyone who wants to use our products. The earlier you can get us in, the more we can assist you, because when you're sort of getting us in at stage 4, stage 5, it's very hard to then make sure that the strategy you had in place early on actually does meet the targets that you're going to need to meet with your design briefs and your sustainability briefs as well. So do talk to us early. We are here to help. We do have a lot of strategies, a lot of data, a lot of ways that we can help you to reduce carbon output on your projects. So going back to Gina and Jack. So who thinks Gina has the lower carbon output as a vegetarian who loves dairy milk? You'd like to say yes. Who else thinks that Gina has the lower carbon output? Yeah. Well, you already know, James, so put your hand down. So yeah, Gina's CO2 equivalent output, and this is just based on a simple food calculator that I found on the internet. Please don't, and I tried to make the meals comparable as I could. So if it was a stir fry, it was a chicken stir fry versus a vegetarian stir fry. So yeah, we made the meals quite comparable, but it is just a bit of fun. So please don't take the figures as gospel. But yeah, we can see here that Jack's very happy, but actually he's not the winner. So Gina is. So dairy milk. You might feel like you're an eco-criminal because you've not chosen oat or soy, which my daughter does. I drink the dairy milk, and I'm okay with that because I'm balancing out what I'm drinking in terms of my dairy milk with vegetarian options. And I think that's the same thing that we can do with design. It's about taking an option, taking a material, balancing them out to just make that carbon output slightly lower. But we can all do a lot to reduce our personal carbon outputs. But if we gave up meat and dairy for a year, we'd save 2,000 kilograms of carbon equivalent per year. But if we reduce that slab, that 10 metre by 10 metre concrete slab by just 50 mil, and that takes, well, it says less than 30 minutes, it takes 5 minutes to reduce the slab down, we'll save the same amount as what we can do personally in a year. And I think that really does bring home the message as designers, the impact we can have in reducing carbon output in our projects and in our design briefs as well. And it's for us to educate people. So we were talking about that earlier. We've got to educate our clients and what we can do to significantly reduce our carbon output and combat climate change, because it is us who can make the difference. So just key messages from today. So as I've just said, construction industry is a key contributor to CO2 emissions, but that means we can have the greatest dent and impact on reducing that carbon output. Transparency in products and processes is essential for you as designers. You need that information to be able to give that correct data to your clients. We're on that early journey, so sharing knowledge is fundamental to all of us. And without sharing knowledge and information, we can't progress. So yeah, just there, we'd all have a need to play a part in the route to net zero carbon. For me, key is designing for longevity. It's a key approach. Adaptability and longevity are key approaches to reducing our carbon outputs. We all know we need to develop sustainable designs. And the earlier you get us involved in a project, the better it will be, because the later it is, the more difficult it will be to make those changes further on in the project. But the key message is that in our daily lives and in our design lives, a balanced approach to specification is fundamental to addressing climate change.